Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thank you for listening to Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 32, and it's about homelessness and redemption and hope and faith and fear and food. And Brett Swayn is the head chef and the proprietor of a restaurant here in Nashville, Tennessee called The Cookery. And Brett is from Perth, Australia. And between Perth, Australia and Nashville, Tennessee, he has one heck of a life to tell you about, as he told me. Brett was homeless, and he was given a chance to make something of himself, and he was given skills, and now he is not homeless, obviously, and well, I don't know about obviously, but he owns The Cookery, and he trains homeless how to be chefs, and he gets them housing, and he gets them ministry. So this is his story, and our conversation was wonderful. You'll hear people walking around upstairs, squeaky noises in our conversation. That's hopefully you'll kind of tune it out as you listen to the conversation. You'll get used to it, but that's just people walking around in the restaurant because we were downstairs in the basement talking. And homelessness is such a human thing, and none of us know why a person ends up homeless. We may sit in our car and look the other way because, we feel weird about the person standing there asking for money. We don't know their story. We just feel awkward. Or maybe we give them money and we give them a hello and a loving, kind, wave or whatever, even if we don't have money. Whatever it is, it only takes a couple doorways to be each other, Choices, or sometimes choices put upon you, like the woman who is abused by her husband, who escapes in the middle of the night with nothing other than the shirt on her back and her children in tow, and then spends the next however many months in a shelter. Or the person addicted to drugs who can't quite kick the habit. Or, somebody with PTSD coming back from the war. Or, there's a million different reasons. So I've sat in my car and sometimes felt awkward. I'm not going to lie. I've felt awkward sometimes when a homeless person is there with their sign and I'm at the stoplight. Awkward because I don't have any extra money on me to give them, and then I feel bad, like I should be helping. Or awkward because I don't have the time in that moment. I forget about being a human being. I try my best to look and smile and wave, as in those moments. But sometimes I don't, and sometimes I'm distracted. Sometimes I'm on the phone, on my little earbuds, and I'm having a conversation, and it only takes a smile, really, to say to someone, I see you. We all just want to be seen, right? At least I feel like that. Anyway, I could wax poetic about this all, but homelessness sucks. I don't think, on average, people want to be homeless. And sure, choices. Some people make poor choices. But again, sometimes life just sucks, and things happen, and the result is even suckier. I really enjoyed speaking with Brett. I think he's an incredible human being. He's doing so much for the community. He's on a mission for sure. And anyway, the usual stuff, heyhumanpodcast.com. Hey Human is on iTunes. It's on your iPhones. You can search for it in your podcast app. If you have a Google phone, you can go to Podbean app, download that for free, and listen to it there. Anyway, Instagram.com/HeyHumanPodcast, Facebook.com/HeyHumanPodcast. Thanks for listening, everybody. I really appreciate it. If you can, rate, review, pass on the episodes to your friends. Tell everyone you know. Get the word out. Let's make humanity stronger by making the world smaller, by listening to these stories and seeing ourselves in each person, even if it's just a little bit. All right. Love you, mean it. Here we go. Hi, Brett.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good.
Thank you for being on Hey Human.
It's an honor.
I really appreciate it. We met through my friend David, who has been extraordinary in introducing me to very interesting, cool, lovely people. And you are one of those people. So.
I hope so.
Yeah.
By the end of it, we'll know.
Yeah, by the end of it, we'll know. So here we are, sitting in the downstairs of the Cookery, which is your restaurant.
Yes.
And you're the executive everything.
Yeah, I guess. Whatever that is. I fit in the suitcase.
Yeah.
I travel.
And you're here in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yes.
But that is not where your story begins.
No.
Your story begins in Perth, Australia.
Yes, I was born in Perth, Western Australia, and I left at the age of 21. Is that going to be too loud?
I don't think so.
Okay.
There's people walking upstairs. It's sort of nice. It makes you feel like you're never alone.
You're not alone, yeah. I left Australia when I was about 21 to find a better version of myself.
What does that mean?
At the time, I thought it was about music, and I just wanted to become something greater than how I currently saw myself, and I thought that was the vehicle of it. Because
you were a performing writer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I thought America was the way to do it. And I got flown to Hofgarten, Austria, on kind of like a freak thing. I knew I was going to be getting out of the country. I just didn't know how. And a friend of mine took a demo that I'd been recording, and he was on a European tour just for a vacation. And he'd go into these different places, and everywhere he went, he would play this tape. And this one guy who turned out to be a Kiwi, a New Zealander, who had a pub in Hofgarten, Austria, he heard it and he said, "What is this about? Would you guys be interested in coming to Austria and to play for the ski season?"
Cool.
And my friend, somehow he worked his way into the deal, saying, "Oh yeah, we do the kind of stuff all the time back home," it was a total lie. But we put it together, and that's how I got to America, because I saved up my money while I was playing in the ski resort, and leaving a lot of the story out, I got over to Australia with another mate of mine by the name of Rod Scala.
Oh, over to America.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
We landed in LA,
Uh-huh.
and that was an adventure.
Scary.
Yeah, we lasted about 2 weeks, and money started already running very fine.
And how old were you at that point?
21.
21.
Yeah, and
Okay.
then someone said, "You really need to go to the Third Coast, Austin." And I was like, what's the Third Coast in America, and what is Austin? So with only a little bit of money remaining, we bought a car and we drove over to Austin, Texas.
You bought a car.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That was crazy. We drove, which is really funny, because in America, when you get over here, they talk about the international driver's license, right? So you buy an international driver's license for, I think at the time it was like $20 or $30 or something, and you immediately just transferred your driving permission from whatever country you're in to America, which is hilarious, because we're driving on the other side of the road back home. And then in LA, you've got all this riding on the roads. And we didn't know. We were trying to read what the road was telling us as we're driving on the wrong side with the steering wheel. It was hilarious if it wasn't so scary for other people.
Yeah, super scary. And then back then you had people in LA shooting at you.
Yeah, it was.
Those were the days of people shooting at you while you were driving.
We didn't have that, but it was an adventure. Ordering food with a thick Australian accent was hilarious.
Yeah.
Over the intercom.
Oh
they would just give up. So
oh gosh.
That was
when you talk to the Peanuts parents.
With our accent too.
Yeah.
I think they thought we were swearing at them.
Oh my goodness.
So,
that's hilarious.
Yeah.
So you made your way to Austin.
Yeah.
You've got stars in your eyes, a plan to be famous, I guess.
Yeah. Well, the plan was, everything that encapsulates. I think a lot of people who are trying to do that, there's this inner need to feel like they've made a difference in the world, to feel that they're being heard, to feel like they've connected to people. Unfortunately, the world and the way that we perceive fame and how we've even constructed it, it's very dark. But you don't realize it at the time if you haven't had any form of inner spiritual awakening or whatever, you just look and you see the power of it, and you see the presentation, and it becomes alluring. Like, oh, so they're the movers and shakers in the world. I want to do that because I want to buy my mum a house. I want to buy my sister a place. I want to be able to drive in a nice car. And
because we're told that's what's important.
Yeah, we're told that's what's important, and we're also told that it's achievable this way.
Yeah. And while they're telling us that, they're also telling us why we'll never be good enough, even at the top level. When you're at the very top, people are just waiting for you to fall.
Oh yeah, Australians are pretty famous for that. They root for the underdog, and as soon as the underdog gets there, they beat their tear down.
I think human beings are like that.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
So I don't know. I saw it as a means to the end, and that was really, when you break it down, as crazy or as flowery as it might sound, there is a deep need for people to be seen and loved, and known that they're accepted. And it's the craziest thing. It's like a comedian I once heard that if people aren't laughing, the inner self-loathing begins to take over. I think it's the same with any art form. Where you're putting yourself out and you're expending so much energy to try and get people to like you and accept what you're doing and applaud it in a way that it means affirmation rather than just simple you're doing good. It has to be an inner affirmation of in a vital sense that you're alive and that you're not just existing. And so art is a really tricky wrestling game on the inside, in whatever form. And I found out that, this is just a side note, but later on, culinary is a lot more efficient in the way of gaining satisfaction, because you can work on a song for 3 to 6 months, and people go, yeah, that's all right. But you give them a good hamburger with all the fixings, and in 5 minutes they're going, this is good.
Because food is love. I mean, I think music is love as well.
It is.
Food is a universal love, because we all require that sustenance, and it does feel like nurturing when we're eating. Right.
Well, music for me, in the beginning, it was its own God. Yeah. And that's the scary thing, because you're trying to feed this you're as good as your next song, or you're as good as the lick you just played on the instrument, or if as your last gig you're as good as that, and people like you.
Yeah. It's not a be here now thing. It's what was your last great achievement.
Yeah, and so as a means to feed the monster, it's a big monster. It's very demanding. And it has many moving parts, because it's not just do you feel good, it's were you affirmed by making other people feel good, and they might not even feel like listening to what you're playing. That doesn't have anything to do or any bearing on who you are as a person. But it can, if that becomes the monster that feeds you, then it's got a lot of teeth.
And then there's the trap of believing your own hype.
Yeah. Well, I never got to that point, so I don't know, but yeah. Well, God interrupted, and everything's changed. So.
While you were in Austin, God interrupted?
No, in Dallas, chasing the whole thing.
The monster.
Yeah. And while the monster is chasing you, trying to become something, and. Whatever form, you can say it was noble. I just wanted to love this and love that, the people around me, and be a success so I can do these kind of things. Mm-hmm. It's partially true, but the bottom line of that was that the inner craving for affirmation and existence, living rather than even existing. So it led to a very dark path. Because life and love and light was not at the center of it. And around the age of 32, 33, there was just an absolute collapse of everything that you would have called this person, Brett. Absolute collapse. In fact, it was like an H-bomb went off. And when I looked around, I had lost all my friends. Everything from one moment, we're playing gigs where people are lying around the corner, and the next moment you drop off the face of the planet like you never existed, and everybody's gone.
Was this an addiction issue, or was this a
No,
person?
I wasn't addicted, but I mean, it doesn't really matter what it is. For the sake of the telling, for the sake of someone listening to it, it's kind of like Paul talks about this thorn, and all these people are pondering what that thorn actually was for Paul.
The apostle.
Yes, Paul the apostle.
Not Paul Smith down the street. Although he might have a thorn.
Sorry, yeah. And we have all this conjecture and historians, et cetera, pondering what this thorn could possibly be. And I think God was so smart in just letting Paul say thorn, because
it stands for anything.
It stands for anything.
Yeah.
It stands for anything. And for me, it was that way of just this inner collapse of this person. But it wasn't like drugs or alcohol.
It was self.
Yeah, it was self. It was just this inner. There was an implosion.
Yeah.
And and there are working parts in that. But I think it's better for the person who's listening to, if God is tugging on their heart, then that's where He's tugging.
Yeah.
So
you're in this darkness, for lack of a better word, or the black hole of life,
right,
which is an emptiness, a lack of anything. There's nothing there.
I woke up one morning and in the midst of this insanity, and it was insanity, there was a panic. There was this deep panic. I felt like a car, and I was in the car, and it had left the road, and I was flying in the air off a cliff. And I had the steering wheel in my hand, but there was no traction. You're in the middle of the air. That sense of panic was what it felt like. It was terror. I knew that I was out of control, and my car had left the road, and the bang was coming, and it's a terrible feeling. And again, if anybody feels that, what happened was the soul began to cry out. And one morning, it was the craziest thing. I didn't even know. I woke up with this thought, go get the Bible. I didn't even know we had one in the house. And for the sake of keeping the story short, I opened up the Bible, and what I read in there was this man from 2,000 years ago was reading me, and it was terrifying. That kind of scene where and consciousness grows really close to your eyeballs. It was like that. It was like, what is happening? And how is this guy from another time knowing what's going on? And why do I feel like in all the bad parts, here I am? And it was all incredibly accurate. And but there was also this stuff where he was making these promises about if you repent, and I didn't even know what repent was. I didn't grow up in church. I didn't know what all these things were. And so I just began to hold on to this. And you think, okay, well, whoever this Jesus is, and whoever whatever's going on with this Bible that is reading me, what am I supposed to do with all this? I guess I'm just going to hold on and see what happens. And it wasn't a place of like, oh, I found the buoy in the middle of the storm, or I found the island. Actually, it got worse. It got way worse. I lost everything with a little E, because I gained everything with a big E when he finally showed up. It was a very difficult thing, and I couldn't tell people what was happening at the time because you sound crazy. You might even sound crazy now. I don't know. It's but
were you still in Texas?
Yes, I was in Texas, but I'd moved to Dallas. At this point, I'd gotten married.
Oh, okay.
At the time, it's very difficult to. I entertained the thought of getting married for the wrong reason.
I understand.
And
I think many people do.
Yeah, and that was part of my implosion. And it was part of the wreckage too. So living in Dallas and finding myself completely annihilated on the inside, and feeling like I was dying, where the world, I didn't realize that you look at green and you have this emotional response, however subtle, however unconscious, which comes down to, I guess, an energy spark. You look at, that's kind of sounded weird, but
no,
if you look at certain things, you go, oh, I like it. Well, when I found that I was just dying on the inside. There's no other word. It felt like I was dying. So there was no emotional response to laughter. No emotional response to color.
You had flatlined.
Yeah, I had flatlined.
Yeah.
And yet I was still walking around. And the inner death was so immense that I remember one time I was just sitting down on a bench and I wouldn't breathe unless my body made me, because there was so much pain. And I was done. I spent about 7 months just on my face. Every morning I'd be trying to read this book, trying to find...
The Bible?
Yes. Find what was going on and how to get out of what I was feeling. And I was magnetically drawn to a place that was cutting me to pieces.
How do you mean?
Because it wasn't a safe place. When I went into the Bible, it wasn't like... it's okay, Brett, you were just messed up and we're going to take care of you now. It was, I was going to the place where he was going into the center of pain. I didn't realize it at the time. So going into that center of pain meant I felt a lot. And I felt like I was getting cut to pieces. I was getting torn to ribbons. It wasn't making an allowance for my mistakes. There wasn't making an excuse for my mistakes. It was, you did wrong, and own up to it.
What do you feel like your wrong was?
Oh my gosh, so many things.
There's a long list?
Yeah.
A laundry list?
Yeah. I think it was Mel Gibson. They said, what's your one regret? And he says, I don't have one regret. They usually come in clusters.
It's a great line.
And I think for me, there was that great cluster. It was all at once, just looking over my whole life and realizing the wreckage, It was a terrible awakening in that sense. But there was things that were happening that I couldn't tell anyone, that I was witnessing and feeling on the inside of me, changing.
Your DNA.
Yeah, good. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And but you couldn't tell anyone. To expound on that would take too long, but it was a very quiet, personal, inward journey with only, at the time I just thought it was me and this book, but something was happening in my soul and there was an awakening.
I do believe we have to die to be reborn, and that death is so painful.
Yes.
And lonely and
yes.
confusing and all the stuff.
Yes, it was very ugly. It was a very ugly death for me. In the Gospel of Matthew, we talk about the guys, Jesus goes up on a mountain to deliver the Beatitudes. But if you read the same Gospel in Luke, he's on level ground. And I think the spiritual journey is getting to a place where you can finally at least attempt to be able to look into the eyes of God and for the transference to happen where you were once dead, now you are alive. I really felt like I was in the grave. And on a Friday morning around 9 a.m., I'd been fasting days, and I was in a basketball court and I was yelling out to him. And I said, there's nothing left of me. There's nothing left. What else do you want? No one was around, and I didn't know who I was yelling at. But in that moment, the transfer happened. God showed up in a way that I keep very private. And I've never been the same since. I didn't know God would show up in a person's life. I didn't grow up in church. I had no idea. I didn't know he would come to the truly broken, who didn't deserve to have a voice heard, who truly felt like they were in prison for their own mistakes and deserved to be so.
But that was your self-imposed feeling like you didn't deserve it.
Right, I guess. Because
I would argue that everyone deserves it.
Yes. Well, I would now.
Yeah. But
being that person then?
Yeah.
No, I thought I got everything I was deserving to get.
Yeah.
And, so It sounds so. I wish I could just blurt out the experience in
Why
a way
don't
that.
you? Just because it's so personal, or you
Yeah,
think people
well,
think you're crazy? Or
well,
what?
I don't mind that.
Okay.
I mean,
I won't
well,
think you're
the funny
crazy.
thing, the funny thing was when it happened. If I was to share it all, when it happened, I was dead 1 second, and I heard the voice, and then I was more alive than I've ever been in my whole life, and I didn't know who was talking to me at first until the very end, when the voice that was speaking to me was here, although I saw nothing. And at the end he said, no, when you go, and I understood I was coming to Nashville, when you go, do not be afraid, for I'll be with you. And then the voice that was here went up. And
That's out of Matthew too, isn't it?
I didn't know it. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, it is. And I didn't know. What happened was it went up, and I was like released. And I was staring up, and I came to myself and went, oh my gosh, he's real. And better than Santa Claus. He's alive. And I wanted to tear through the apartment complex and bang on every door. I had a fire in me that is not really abated at all. And I've learned to try and moderate how much I let it pour out, because it can scare people. But I have never been the same. I was set on fire.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing was, at the same time, it was like there was a voice that was going, now, shh, because it's a secret. And I don't understand that, other than when Mary pondered these things in her heart. I've learned that there is a sense that when you tell of these things, when you have these deep experiences with God, for no merit of your own, just because God is good, and He does something, it's like you have to be careful on with whom you share it with, which is absolutely hilarious. I'm doing this here. But you got to be careful with whom you share it with, because it's almost like you get this sense that fingerprints are going on the most precious gem you've ever got in your life, and it's tender, and it's sacred, and it's secret, and please don't touch it. You know, it's.
Well, and maybe it's meant to be quiet because it's different for every person.
Yes,
too.
I think so,
and it appears and different, and feels different.
Right. Well, there's also a sense of holy. And holy is an incredibly deep word of sanctification and sacredness that is above my comprehension. But I do know it also is something that is set apart for God's use and for God Himself. And I don't know how to speak well of it, as I've just shown. I
thought you were beautifully eloquent, personally, but
he when He gives us this sacred thing. I used to be ashamed of my name. When you used to say my name as a kid, my last name, I thought you were swearing, and I didn't realize this. All I knew was, as a kid, please don't call me by my last name. I didn't know why. Didn't have wordage. But at that moment when the exchange happened, you could call me by my last name now. I wasn't ashamed anymore. He changed my name, and I don't even know how He did it. It's the wildest thing.
Resonance.
Yeah, resonance. Yes, that's beautiful. So I had this unction that I just wanted to go screaming through the neighborhood and tell everybody the greatest news ever, that you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
That you're going to be okay because He's real. And yet I couldn't tell anybody. And immediately someone, when I did tell someone, they wanted me to see a psychiatrist. And now, later on, in the innocence of it, I didn't understand then, but in the innocence of it, I understand now. So many people do horrible, horrible things in the name of God.
Absolutely.
And I think wisdom is vindicated by its children. You have to watch people to see. You have to look for fruit. You have to inspect it. And we can all slip up and fail. Life is not a snapshot. It's a much longer race.
It's a marathon.
Yeah. So we're not.
It's not a sprint.
No. And
even some of the shortest lives are living their lives as a marathon.
Yes. Yeah.
For sure.
So...
But that wasn't, I mean, that was an incredible beginning.
Yes, that
it
was.
certainly wasn't.
No, and you think, okay, so you just found out God is real. Yes. No idea that he was. Yes. My prayer life went up about 1,000%.
Meaning you started praying?
I mean, I was praying like crazy before, but it was from a place of desperation and hurt and self-hatred.
Yeah.
And please help me forgive myself. And please forgive me. To, oh my gosh, you're real. Oh my gosh, this is awesome. When do I get my big S on my chest and my red boots and I can fly around the whole city and begin to save people? And that's not how it works. It's just, it feels... He cleansed my mind like cellophane. He not only healed me from my hurt, but he gives this washing so pure and so clean that not only are you cleansed from your sin or cleansed from what you've done, and he resurrects you, rebirths you, but he also gives you this unworded understanding of how your brokenness led that to happen. Like you can't look back now that you're healed and look to who you were, who was throwing up on everybody, and go, stop throwing up on everybody, you jerk. Yeah. Because it's not fair to now judge yourself that you're healed as if you were when you were throwing up on people. People are sick. I got to be careful with that analogy, but I understood that my brokenness, my huge inner psyche being a wrecked garden, it grew terrible thistles, it grew terrible stuff. But he'd made me well. And it was funny because when I was the person before, people would say, well, gee, he's a nice guy. No idea of what was on the inside of me.
Sure.
And now that I was made well, they thought I was weird. And I thought, that's crazy. Yeah, I'm safer to be around now. And you think I'm weird now? So it's just the way of it. I think it's part of it. And then you begin to realize just, wow, how broken things are.
It's funny because you speak a lot of sin and how you feel about that. And to me, the word sin is such a tricky word. And I look at it as the ultimate concept of what sin is a lack of love. Mm-hmm. And that's because you can pile whatever your belief system is, you can pile them all under a lack of love, which is a lack of understanding, all that stuff.
Yeah, I think sin is a deed or a thought that is separated from God.
Or love. That's what love is for me.
Yeah, God is love.
Yeah. And there's a saying that I really, really love. I heard it a long time ago, and it was, life is a prison and the crime is how much we hate ourselves. And, I mean, if you equate that to that lack of love and that lack of... If you believe in a creator, then somebody who creates you out of pure love, how sad must they be that you don't feel that love yourself?
Right. I totally agree. In fact, because I wasn't going to share this bit, but coming up to the moment where God radically collided into my life. I mean, he was setting me up for it. He's been around all my life. I just didn't know. I believe he's around us all the time. He just wasn't on the inside yet. There was something that happened as a kid, and I'd forgotten. It would become repressed, and I can say that now. But see, in the moment leading up to the event that happened, I remember being again in this basketball court, and I would do anything. I was just shooting the hoops. I wasn't... I was doing anything to just keep mechanically distracted and functional, and that's what I would do. And I'd just throw the hoop, and I'd throw the hoop, and I'd throw the hoop, with this inner death going on. And I remember feeling at my lowest point, and it's the wildest thing, because at this lowest point, all of a sudden, this image popped up in my mind, and I realized that image was. It was a moment that I'd repressed. It was a moment of my childhood that was so horrific that I'd pushed down. And it came up before my conscious vision, and I remember gasping in horror at it. And in that same moment, and the only words I can use is, in that same moment, it felt like a shot of electricity went through me, and it shattered the image. So it was like flash, it smashed it. And I don't know what I felt free from the image. I was still hurting and extremely weakened, but the image was shattered. And what had happened was, I realized, well, the best way to say it was, for me, is that there was a moment in my life that freeze-framed. And the light, which still shines, was shining behind that freeze frame. But the image cast from the freeze frame was setting the directive for how I would walk out life. It was the shadow and the color for everything that I did. And it was broken, and it was tormented, and it was horrified, and it was shocked, and it was robbed of innocence, and it was a whole bunch of stuff. But that was the image in my subconscious that was directing my conscious actions.
Yes.
So for him to restart my life, that image had to be dealt with. And I think for a lot of people, that's what it's like. I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think there are things that have happened in our life that God has come in His mercy to lead us right to the moment of the freeze frame and break through it. But getting there and looking at the freeze frame, which is necessary, is very difficult, very painful. But it's the only way to get a new life. Otherwise, you're stuck in the old image. So
even if you're not aware it's there.
And I wasn't.
And most especially because I think most people aren't aware of that stuff.
So that was kind of, since you were saying that, I threw that in. And I know this is a lot, but...
No, it's wonderful.
He gave me to come to Nashville. It didn't happen straight away. You think, okay, you hear from God, right? So everything's going to go click, 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 click. No.
That's what happens in the George Burns movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love those movies.
No, there was even more of a journey. There was even more of a testing, because I think God's word, when it comes, it then tests and proves itself. And it has to prove itself in our own life. We have to learn that we can trust it as well in us. So it wasn't an immediate thing. I expected to go immediately, but no, there was a struggle waiting for the time for it to happen, and I'm leaving a lot out. But in the end, when I finally left, I knew, I was told, you're going.
It's time.
Yeah, it was time. It took about 3 months from that moment of not telling anybody. Can you imagine that, sitting on an egg that big? God is so amazing. So He gives me, the world changed at that moment. The world became the dream, and God is real. So everything moved differently. And I get on a Greyhound. There's so many stories, I'm going to leave out so much stuff. But I remember going, Lord, I know what You've done to me, that there's no self-help book. There's no workout regime. There's no purity diet. There's no self-image that can do what You've done. And I just want You to be made known in my life. I just want people to know You're famous. I want them to get to know You. It was so important. So when you sent me to Nashville, I didn't do anything to study about what I was getting into. And I had no money. And I read how to go. If you find out God's real, you better do what He says, right? Why? That was my thinking back then. There's a lot more to it now, but back then I was like, oh, this is what He says. Okay, we're going to go do it. So I came with no money. I came with the clothes on my back and my Bible and the necessary papers, because I'm a foreigner. And I coming into Nashville, I'm like, Lord, lead me, speak to me. I know You can speak to me audibly. I've heard You. So talk to me. Nothing. I pull into Nashville on the Greyhound, which was a ride not from heaven. And I see the big cross downtown at the Lifeway building. And I went, oh my gosh, You sent me to a town where there's a cross in the middle. I'm going to be okay. Didn't know what was happening. And spent the night in the Greyhound. The next morning, a homeless guy says to me, hey, so what are you doing here? And I tell him God's real. I just want everybody to know God's real. Really, He really is. And He's here to fix you. It's awesome. I was like a kid in a candy store, just wanting to share lollies with everyone. And he said, well, so where are you going to stay? And I said, no, I got no money. I don't know what to do. He said, there's a mission around the corner. What's a mission? Isn't that something you do overseas? So I go into the rescue mission. He's like, you get a bed, you get food. And I'm like, I got no money. God organizes a bed for me and food for me. This is awesome. God, you're amazing. I've traveled halfway across the country and you land me. You are so good. And I walk into the mission and I see the dirt, the despair, the hopelessness, the broken men, people leaning against the walls. I remember seeing at one point later on, even a guy, he'd used some kind of drug and there was green stuff coming out of his eyes. It was just, it was a time of what, God, you're real. What am I doing here? I'm going to die here. And the homeless guy says to me, come here, I'll show you where the rest of the homeless hang out. And I went, I'm homeless. I am homeless. What are you doing? Takes me to the library park. I go up in the library, see where the rest of the homeless are hanging out. And I'm praying. I go up to the religious section because it was comforting in that area.
In the library?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly the voice comes over the intercom. This lady says, the library's closing in 15 minutes. And I went, well, at least I know where I'm going. I don't know what you're doing with me, God. Terrified. Yet I knew He is. I don't know what you're doing. I feel like I'm flying through the air with no parachute in a scary way. But, okay. And I think I was reading a Billy Graham book. And I closed the book and I went and put it back on the shelf. And it was no longer a prayer. It's upstairs. No longer a prayer. I was just exhausted. And I said, I'm hungry. Out of frustration. I walk out of the front library doors, the glass doors. And back then, they had columns. I look over one of the columns. And it had a brand new apple sitting there. And I was like, a brand new apple. This is amazing. I didn't even thank God for it. I was just like, brand new apple. This is amazing. I'm so hungry. There it is. I walk over to the apple because I had no money. Walk over to the apple, and as soon as I touch it, He speaks audibly and He says, why do you worry about the little things? And I tell you, I must have looked like a crazy homeless guy at that point because I was walking down the street towards the mission, eating this apple and crying my eyes out because He saw me. And He was with me, and I didn't know what He was doing, but I knew He was with me. That moment gave me the strength to go through 4 months of homelessness, where every day felt like 3 or 4. Just, I know you're going to do something today, this morning, Lord. Okay, you're going to do something around noon. Okay, you're going to do something. Okay, I'm going to meet someone who's going to get me out of here.
And nothing came.
Nothing.
No one happened.
For 4 months. But I remember...
And were you living at the mission?
Yes, I was living at the mission. And I'm leaving a lot out, but the important thing is this. I didn't know He was waiting for a moment. I didn't know. I think a lot of the times when we're in that place where it feels like there's no safety net, He was allowing me to feel as much as I could handle, the full gambit of what it felt like to be homeless. He was teaching me the language of the people that I was to serve. I had to feel what hopelessness felt like. I had to feel what dirt felt like.
Otherwise, you wouldn't have the empathy.
I wouldn't have compassion.
Yeah.
Compassion, by definition, means to suffer with. And so I knew what it stood to stand in the light was like. I knew what it was like to stand in clothes that you haven't been able to wash, and you couldn't stand the smell of yourself. I knew those kind of things.
He got rid of all the planks and all the dirt.
Yeah. So all of these things. But I remember at one point near the end of the 4 month period, I remember standing there and I was beginning to see God amongst the poor. I tell these guys all the time, there are certain colors of the rainbow you will not get unless you deal with the poor. And I got to have my eyes opened, and it went from, get me the heck out of Dodge, please rescue me from this place, to, oh my gosh, you really are among the poor. They would talk about Him all the time. And I would see the most beautiful miracles of heart and even miracles, period. Just biblical stuff. And I said to Him, I will live amongst the poor for the rest of my life, if that's what you want. And I meant it. I meant it because I saw Your grace and Your presence everywhere. I'd finally had another conversion of my heart, I guess. And at that moment, I didn't know He was waiting for the surrender. I didn't know the surrender was the way out of that prison. being around the poor is not a prison to me. My heart was the prison. And once I was amongst them, and I had that turn, within a couple of weeks, someone from Flemings came.
Flemings being a restaurant here in Nashville.
Yeah, because I was just helping out in the kitchens in the morning before I go do Bible studies and anything else, Jesus, I could get. I mean,
as a homeless person?
Yes, as a homeless guy. Yeah, staying in the mission, I just thought, how am I going to give back? How am I going to help? So I'll help out in the kitchen. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
I was a musician.
Sure.
So I would just help. And it was crazy because people were seeing the grace on my life because desperation and hunger kept me on my knees before the Lord, and the Lord loves those things. He loves to feed hungry people in person. So they would see these things happening around me where it got to the point that the programmers would ask me to come and pray for people that they thought was demon possessed.
Really?
Yes, it was nuts. And then the most crazy thing is transients and program people don't mix.
What's a program?
Program is someone who's inside the mission. They go upstairs and they live in the dorms. And,
okay.
Yeah, and they do the work programs. Transients just kept come and go.
Yeah,
but the transients, the programmers weren't supposed to mix because they were teaching the programmers if you mix with the transients, they're still doing drugs and stuff. And you might get pulled back out into it. So they kept them separated. But I had such grace that they even started washing my clothes out of pity for me. It was amazing.
And you were considered a transient.
Yeah, I was a transient.
Yeah.
But I just got grace upon grace. So anyway, when someone from Flemings came, they offered me a job, and I prayed a lot if that was what I was supposed to do, leaving a lot of the story out.
And let's give Flemings some credit for...
Absolutely.
Yeah. Tracy
Riddick and Gabe Fairchild. They were my bosses par excellence. They took me in. They believed. They just saw grace in my life. I started as a prep cook and day cleaner, only working about half a day. And I told the Lord, I'll pay rent at the mission. I'll stay there. But that wasn't to be, and that's too long a story. So anyway, within a few months, they gave me the keys to the restaurant because they saw the grace on my life, and they let me open it. And within a little while after that, I've been flown to different parts of the country to train up opening crews in other states and for brand new Flemings stores. And eventually I became second chef in charge of the Flemings store. And I was there for 8 years, and within the second year of being there, I went to Tracy and Gabe and said, Christmas and Thanksgiving is when the store is closed. Christmas and Thanksgiving is the hardest time for the homeless. Would you allow us to open up the store? And to their credit, they said yes. First time was 26 people. By the 8th year, it was about 400, maybe more.
Unbelievable.
And they would just get this, 4 or 5 star restaurant experience. They would weep. They would weep at all the food they were being given and from the love being attended upon them. And it was an honor and an embarrassingly huge privilege of what I still can't completely encompass with gratitude. It was just an amazing time. But at that point, we had the concept for the cookery.
Which is where we are right now.
It's where we are right now. And when we walked in, it was a wreck. The windows were holes. It was burned out debris all the way up.
This was not a good neighborhood. At
the time. If you saw someone jogging on 12th Avenue, they weren't jogging, they were running.
For their life, yeah. Yes.
So it was weird because my friend Terry Kempfer was the one that found this place. And there's much to be said about Terry. She was my pit bull friend. But she said, Brett, we found a place to do what we've been talking about. And I said, great, well, I'll come and see. We walk in, as I said, windows were holes. There was nothing. It was burnt out wood up there. The toilets were holes in the floor. That's all they were. And she said, yeah, we can do this. It's going to be great. And I said, okay. And she said, God said it's going to be a city on a hill. I went, okay. And then she said, it'll take about 3 months. It took nearly 3 years. We had no money. And each month, rent appeared. I don't know how. But I do remember, in that 3-year period, Terry was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Mm. And I was about the 2.5 year mark, and I was standing at the front, and it almost looked like it did now. And I said, God, if you're going to take Terry home, I would like her to see it. I would like her to see it open before you do that, if that's what you're going to do, because they were saying that she might not make the opening. And I said, but if it's sin, because it's been so hard, if it's sin in me that's holding us back from opening, can we deal with it, please? Because I wanted to see. And it was a crazy prayer, but he gave me to stop, and he gave me to look around, and he said, do you remember what it looked like? And I remembered the wreckage, the burnt out wood, and the holes. I said, yes. He said, what do you think? And I said, it's beautiful. He said, what did some of the people say? I brought in pastors, constructional lawyers. I brought in everybody I could to try and give me wisdom. And I said, some of them said it was too far gone, it would cost too much and take too long. And he said, what do you think? And I said, it's beautiful. And he said, so it will be. So it will be with the souls that I send here. Some people say, too far gone, cost too much and take too long, but I'm going to make it beautiful. And that's the story of the cookery. That's what he's been doing. And I get to see it all the time.
Explain to everyone listening what the cookery does.
It is a working cafe where we bring in the homeless and we train them in the culinary arts. And while they're here, we offer them all the benefits of the gospel that we can give. Knowing Jesus, reading his word, living it out every day amongst us. Loving one another, even though we sometimes get bruised knees and bloody noses. And just trying to teach a person not only what they can do with their hands, but who they really are and who they're made to be, and receive that resurrection of hope and restoration of the identity and dignity of the person. And we do that in the context of a culinary school and working cafe. And they receive a training very quickly where perhaps hands that used to destroy things, someone says, that is good. And the affirmation begins to compound. And the whole person begins to feel like they have something to offer. Mm-hmm. And
what happens if somebody comes to you that wants to be a part of this and they don't believe in a higher power? I mean...
I don't mind.
You don't mind?
No, yeah. Because if the reason they have breath is because love lives in them.
That's a great answer. I have your little postcard from upstairs, and it says all the different things that the cookery does. It says the cookery cooks up hope alongside a selection of burgers, salads, and more.
Yes.
2 discipleship houses offer a safe place for culinary students to live and grow in the community. Talk about that.
Okay, the 2 houses. Gosh. It's hard to put all this in sound bites, little bits. But basically we have 2 houses where the owners... This is back a few years ago, so you know how Nashville's gone insane now with rent.
Gosh.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. 12 South is now ridiculous. Mm-hmm. It went boom, which is funny.
Good for you. You own property on it.
Yeah, it's just nuts.
It's like being on a giant Monopoly board and you're in Park Place.
Yeah. Yeah, well, back then it was...
Back then, not so much.
Yeah. But, yeah. Anyway, so... gosh, we got this house up on Thompson Lane area, and it was actually taken on because back then, again, I'm leaving out a lot of the story, but the floods hit, and I was released from Flemings the same week the floods hit. And I had all this provision. It's too much to tell, but I had a pastor call me up, and there was this schizophrenic 6'3" ex-National Guard.
Oh my goodness.
Who said that he could discipline people with a spoon and meant it. And he was in his 30s, and they called me and said, you're the only one that can control him. I'm like, I'm not a pastor. You're the pastor. I said, well, no, Brett, you need to control him because they're taking him to an emergency tent city, and he was out of control for them. So he was in his 30s, and he was just this young man. And there was another one with him who was in 21, I think it was. And so the only solution we had was, well, we're going to get a house, because I was living in different places. It's another great story of God. But so we got this house, and it became the first disciple house. We just wanted to have the gospel being lived out as best we could. It was like urban monastic living for homeless guys. And it just continued on. And the great thing about it was, like one winter we had in this little 2-bedroom house, like 11 people because of the snow, the killing snow. and people were stepping over each other to get to the sink, and it was incredibly uncomfortable, but the joy was ridiculously higher. At one point we had 17.
Wow.
Yeah. But the guys, they might complain for a second, but they realize the high good. Everyone wants to belong to a story that's bigger than themselves. And truth is something that we all want. And we'll do a lot to invest in that. So until it gets too scary. But anyway, so the first Disciple House, we took it on, and we got to a point where we couldn't afford it. Well, the landowner, Kathy Grutke, yes, I said your name, she offered to take the rent down so we could afford it.
Oh, man, that's beautiful.
And she maintained that for many, many years. I think she only went up recently like $50, which is ridiculous, a month.
Wow.
And so then we got the second house, and it was like $950. It was a 2-story house in an older neighborhood. We kept that for a year because we'd expanded. We'll get more and more people, and then Rob.
So these are people that are living there that are learning the culinary arts.
Yeah, and they live there. Yeah. But I'm giving a plug in for the landowners because
no. I know. I just want to make it clear that that's what the purpose was.
Yeah. We had to have housing for them because if you just take them in, it wasn't just about the cookery at that time. It was seeing that sometimes these guys will get their checks from the government, $600 or whatever it is a month. They only have enough to stay 2 weeks in a hotel, and they get on this cycle that, they're back into the mission again.
Sure.
It's horrible. And I was like, how much is a hotel a week? $250, $300, whatever. And I'm like, are you kidding me? No wonder you can never get out. What about this other housing? Well, it takes a year or two to get into it. So it's a very depressing situation for these guys to be stuck in. Basically, the government is just wasting their money. If you're talking about wanting to restore the person, all you're giving them is it's not a viable solution.
Yeah,
it's just a waste.
Yeah,
and so I look at halfway houses, and they're $150, $200 and something a week. I'm like, how does a homeless guy come into me for $2 so I can get a pack of cigarettes? Come up with $150 to $250 a week for a halfway house. So that was another reason why we started Disciple Houses. It's largely now become open to the cookery students, but we'll still take people on if they're working and they just need to settle themselves and get a little bit of money under their belt. So, we do charge nominal rent, but it was $80 a week for everything, and we give them as much food as we can, etc., and clothing and stuff. So anyway, in the second house, the 2-story house, was $950 a week,
it's a hand up, not a hand out.
Yeah. And the owner, Rob, I came to him after about a year and I said, we can't do this, it's too high. And he said, how much? And I said, well, if you have another house, we're looking for about $650. He said, done. So he gave us this, he took $300 off a month so these guys could stay there.
Amazing. And what are these people's names again?
Kathy Grutke and Rob, I've forgotten your last name, but I love you, brother. So, they're amazing people.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. Okay, I'm going to keep reading down the postcard.
Okay, yeah.
Monthly movie nights showcase a culinary student with a 3-course meal. And so that, you do movie nights here, and then you select one of your students, formerly homeless, to then show what they've got. Yeah,
we bring them up. It's kind of like a graduation moment. And we to pick a movie, like we did Ratatouille one time. So they actually made the picture of the Ratatouille. They actually did that.
Nice.
We're doing Narnia this month. So we're taking some of the foods that they're serving in the movie and we're redoing them.
Oh, that's so neat.
And so the folks get to have this wonderful movie experience with an appropriate meal to go with it at a great price. And then they also get to hear the men's story.
I love it. That's so wonderful. Yeah. 13 culinary students have graduated from the program. All were formerly homeless. That's wonderful. Twice a week you do Serve Safe certification. That's taught at a local prison.
Yes. Yeah, we got blessed to go into the local prison to bring... These guys don't expect us. We walk in with a chef coat and they think they're just going to be learning about food safety, and we talk about life.
Yeah.
And put it in the context. Of course, they learn food safety, and we've had really good success with the people that actually make it all the way to the test. And it gives them hope.
Yeah.
Because they get management level testing, and it lasts for 5 years.
Hope is everything. I don't think people truly understand that.
Until you lose it.
Hope is everything.
Yeah. When you get to the point that it's feather thin, And you realize just like a word safe becomes golden. When you're sleeping on the streets for these guys and they can't rest
And
because
women.
someone's... Yes.
Yeah, especially women.
Yes. Worse.
Yeah, because...
Worse.
Yeah, they're extremely vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love a house. We haven't had a lady that's been called and strong enough to lead, but we would love a house for women and for women and kids. You know,
Yeah.
I think there's not enough. There are some services out there, and they do incredible. It's not enough.
Yeah. It's never going to be enough until there is no more homelessness. I mean, that's the reality. But God bless you doing your part.
Keep trying, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so at Thanksgiving and Christmas, you spoke of that. You feed up to 350 people. And breakfast is served at Downtown Presbyterian Church for up to 200
every
homeless.
Saturday.
Every Saturday.
And then we hit the streets. That's why we close the restaurant on Saturdays. Before, we close it on Friday nights just so we can be together as a family and we worship and we sing songs together. And so we don't have to be thinking about work. We just stop.
Sabbath.
And then on Saturdays, it's just our time. I try to be careful with a term that could sound religious to people, because the religious people had Jesus right amongst them and they didn't see him.
Right.
So for me, it's a time of making sure we're intentfully separating ourselves to rest.
Yeah.
And look up. And so on Saturday we closed the restaurant, which I have to applaud my board because they were very nervous when I said this. You don't do this to a restaurant. But because we were feeding downtown, some of the guys couldn't come because they knew they had to work that night and they didn't want to exhaust themselves.
Yeah.
So I said, fine, let's close the restaurant.
Yeah.
And it has, not only has it increased in work, but the support from the people has increased. And most especially, these guys feel like they're valued and that they truly are part of a mission-minded community rather than a business-minded.
Yeah. When you speak of rest, you don't want to call it Sabbath. I understand that. But for me, I think rest is, and I would call myself somebody who is almost a workaholic, if not a workaholic. I'm constantly going, I love everything I do.
Yeah.
So I'm always doing,
That's
I'm always
awesome.
going. But the thing is that I forget to take a moment, and then I feel guilty when I take the moment. And I think it's so important for everyone, myself included, I speak to myself in this, is that you don't get to recharge if you don't give yourself permission to rest. It's the hardest permission to give, to take a moment to breathe.
Especially because, we've been wired, playtime's over now, adult, and run.
You're a grown-up now.
Yeah. Well, I think...
it.
I think it's in the book of Ezekiel. It was a real eye-opener for me. God actually says to the priest, he said, you've profaned my Sabbaths, plural. And I was like, what does plural mean? And then I realized the word became flesh. Every word that Jesus spoke, when it's received with a pure heart, is rest. And when we don't believe God in his goodness is saying these things for our rest, then each word that is a Sabbath that is not believed is like profaning the intent of why the word came. I've come to bring you rest. I've come to bring you peace. I've come to bring
peace.
you... Yeah.
Let there be peace.
Yeah. Which is, it can be sometimes inwardly violent getting to that place where... I love what Bono said. I'm running to stand still. And I think...
it's a great song.
Yeah, it's a place that we have to be violent to get to sometimes. But when we get there, we realize, it really is what he really is good. It was hard getting here, but it was worth it now.
Yeah, I often say that it isn't whether or not I have faith in God, it's whether or not I really believe God has faith in me. And sometimes it's really hard to remember,
It's good.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't do a plan B. He just gave Jesus in the church.
All right, so there's a couple more things on here.
Okay.
The community food pantry is free and open to the public. So you have a garden?
Oh, wow. Cultivate is talking to us about helping us expand on that too. We've had a garden, and we would like to continue because I would like these guys to learn from the ground up. We have an incredibly a large amount of work and tasks that we do with only a small amount of hands. So we haven't been able to keep up all the things that we want to do, like having a garden. But we do have people that grow gardens and they give us food.
That's what the open pantry is?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Fresh Market, who are absolutely amazing. They give us like crazy, like $100,000 a year worth of food that we just give away to people.
That's lovely.
Yeah, some of it is kind of crazy, like apple pie. And then we get but I remember when we first started doing the food thing, we had a lovely coffee shop who's, all around the country, and I shall not name. And they're very big, and I appreciate it very much. And they started with an S, but when they gave us their pastries, which we really appreciated, they were very hard. And also, there's an epidemic amongst the homeless because the most readily received food is carbohydrate and sugar based. So diabetes is rampant, which affects the feet.
Oh yes.
So they're walking everywhere. So it's an incredibly difficult. Again, it's like giving a person $650 a month and going, good, we've done Social Security and they're getting their social benefit, but giving them no safe way. No. It's very difficult getting to a place where they can function on that.
Yeah.
So it's really, what's it for?
Yeah.
So you get all this free food and it's appreciated, but what's it for?
But it's hurting them.
Yeah, so you look at all these homeless guys and go, well, they're fat. They should get a job and they're just lazy and blah, blah. We're poisoning them with a lot of the food that we have. And they can't say no because they're hungry.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's everyone, but it is an epidemic.
Yeah.
It is. And so I was just asking God, what can we do? Fresh Market calls me up and they get organic salads and all this crazy stuff and they eat better than some of us. I think it's incredible.
It's wonderful.
It's awesome.
Yay.
Well, America can do it.
Yes.
We really can.
Yeah.
We really can. There's wonderful gleaning programs like Society of St. Andrews, and there's so much food that is just needs to be better organized. Even Christmas and Thanksgiving, there should be 4 points around the city all connected to a hub rather than people just mavericking and wasting.
And we waste a lot of food.
Yes.
I mean, when I was upstairs waiting for you to come out, I was watching somebody bust a table and there was, still food left over, like a whole thing of chips. And I thought, that's just such a weird juxtaposition in a place like this that's doing so much good and someone's eating and not taking it all and not, it's interesting. I'm all stuffed up now because I've been crying through this whole conversation. Okay, so the last thing on here, in the winter, assistance with cold weather shelters, and we spoke of that. And so
back when we first started doing it, there was like 6 people that were sleeping outside of a church that I love, and I don't understand, in the dead of winter while they were sleeping on concrete, at the back of houses that the church owned.
Wow.
Yeah, and I didn't understand it, and I don't know the math for that, and I'm not judging them, because I will say that moment catapulted us to go ask a preacher friend of mine, a pastor friend of mine, Pastor Ray DeVries, who had a church where had a basketball court at the back and they weren't using it, enclosed basketball. And I said to him, would you mind if we bring in 6 people 2 times a week and keep them overnight? And we'll hide them upstairs so they can leave their bags there because they're older and it's hard carrying your stuff around. He said yes to the 6 and never said no to the 90. They just kept coming and coming. So for 6 years, especially during the floods, we were open every Wednesday, every Saturday, all year long. I know Room at the Inn only does it in the winter. We did it all year long.
Wow.
And
what's with you in basketball courts?
I know. That's funny you picked it up because God reminded. I'll tell you that story off. Yeah, it's absolutely true, and He reminded me later. So we're in a basketball court, and we got all these people, and we did it for 6 years, and then the church eventually was bought out by a primarily child ministry, child-centered, and there was many concerns about that, so we had to stop. Yeah. And I think it was perfect time because the cookery fired off.
Yeah.
And we didn't have enough personnel to run both.
Sure.
But I'm hoping soon that someone, maybe who's hearing this, has a place where there's some showers or like a hall or a warehouse where we can begin to house. Because again, there are people doing it, but there's not enough. In fact, many people in the metro have come to us about. We didn't know what kind of impact we were having, and since it's closed, they've come to us individually. I'm like, well, that's wonderful. So help us get one.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens.
The powers that be, you mean, are coming to you?
Yeah, the powers that be. Yeah, powers that be. If you miss us that much, because we were using the guys too. It was, again, affirming for them to be able to help run a shelter because they were needed.
Sure.
And so we're hoping that comes around again.
Wow. Brett, thank you so very much.
It's an honor.
The cookery, everyone, come and eat. And
it's really good food.
Yeah, and give your support.
High quality.
And is there a donation place?
Yeah, you can go on thecookery.org. Obviously we got to pay bills like everybody. And for us, the ministry comes first, so we're not always super, super efficient on business. We're not lax or lazy in our principles. It's just that the ministry must come first.
Yeah.
So the support is appreciated.
Yeah.
But the bigger thing is, come form a relationship. Life happens amongst the poor, and it's very contagious.
Brett Swayn, thank you.
It's an honor. Thank you, Susan.
Have a wonderful day.
You
Bye,
too.
everybody. Thank you for listening.